Namaskar. I welcome you all in this session on research process and how to write a research paper. On behalf of Wiki School of Business Management and on my behalf, I specially thanks to UGC HRDC for providing me this wonderful opportunity to talk to you on the topic research process and how to write a research paper. So let's start the session. And what is the flow of the session? So in this session, we are going to look into how is the research process all about, and let us start with the research. So friends, first of all, we are going to look into throughout the session what is research process, and what to include in the research paper writing. So let's start. So this is the outline of the session. We're going to look into what is research, why do we go for research, how do we go for research, use of computer in research, and research ethics. So what do you mean by research? When we understand this word research, or when we listen the word research for the first time, it means re plus search. So re means what? Re means again and again. And search means to find out something. The following is the process. So what happens is any person observes the phenomena. And after observing the phenomena, the person is trying to collect the data. Once you collect the data, you are trying to analyze the data, you are trying to find out the solutions and the conclusions, and therefore, this process is somewhere considered as observation of the phenomena again and again from different dimensions. For example, there are many theories of learning due to observation from different dimensions. So the research is a process of which a person observes the phenomena again and again and collects the data, and on the basis of data, he draws some conclusions. So suppose you have some problem in hand and you want to find out the solution of the same, what would you do? You would try to observe, you would try to see the process, you would try to analyze the phenomena again and again, you would try to collect the data, and you would try to draw some conclusions. So research is oriented towards the discovery of relationship that exist among phenomena of the world in which we live. So the fundamental assumption is that the invariant relationship exists between certain antecedents and certain consequence. So that under a specific set of conditions, certain consequence can be expected to follow the introduction of the given antecedent. So let us try to understand in detail what it is all about. So friends, when we are saying research design, see, when any time as a researcher, when you are coming across, the research process, then of course your mentors, your guide, they will be talking about research design. Okay, so what is research design? Research design refers to the entire process of planning and carrying out a research study. So say for example, I want to study the impact of mergers and acquisitions on the performance of the bank. What would I do? So I would try to collect the data before merger and after merger, right? And I would design, first of all, the whole system, the whole process of how would I collect the data, from where would I collect the data, how would I analyze the data, what would be the sample size, what would be the flow of the research, right? And so on and so forth. So there are various dimensions and the aspects that you need to plan and you need to carry out for a research study. Secondly, research design is the plan, structure, and a strategy of investigation to receive answers, to receive questions, and control variances. So what happens is research design in general is a plan. What do you plan? You are planning about starting from title to the final report that you are going to draw. So you're planning the structure, you're You're planning the strategy. Strategy for what? Strategy for investigation, strategy for identifying, strategy for analyzing, strategy for finding out the solution or coming to the conclusion, or strategies to receive the answers to research questions and control the big answers. So, friends, in general, when we are saying research process, then what you need to do? So, there are 10 questions that explains research process according to me. The first is, what is the study about? Second is, why the study is being made? What is the reason? Right. Third is, where will the study be carried out? That is, how would you collect the data? Where exactly would you carry it out? Would you go through the secondary data, or would you go for the primary data? So, what type of data would you require? Next would be, from where the required data would be collected, from where exactly, right? So we need to be very specific about the research process, right? I want to collect the data about the mergers and acquisitions, for example. Okay, from where would I collect? If I'm saying from bank, many times, when we ask to the students, they're saying from bank, we would try to analyze the data. But then we ask, what exactly? Bank means what? It is an institution. And there are a lot of people working in that. From where would you collect the data? And what periods are included for the study? Is it 10 days, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever down the line? Also, you need to look into what would be the sample design. Friends, this is also very, very important. You need to look into how would be the sample, what would be the representative of the population, okay, whether the sample represents the population, and importantly, how would you, design the methodology to collect the sample, and what would be designed in general. Also, which techniques of the data collection be used, right? How would you collect the data? Which would be the techniques for the data collection? Would you collect through the, are you going to do for qualitative or the quantitative? And if it is so, how are you going for it? Okay. And once you're talking about collecting the data, the next would be the analysis stage. So your answer or the question would be, how would you analyze the data, right? So how the data would be analyzed and which style would be used for analyzing the data. So the point is, when we are saying research process in general, what is important for all of us is to jot down the answer of this question. And once we have answer of these questions, that means we are clear with the flow. Believe me, once you are clear with the flow, reaching to the result is not a big deal for you. It's a small deal. Why? Because you know where to go. Say, for example, today I'm deciding that I want to go from Chandkheda to the university. So my question would be, how would I go? How would I go? Which way I would go? Would I go in auto? Would I go in car? Would I go in bus? How would I go? Where would I go? Which way I would go? On which road I want to go? In how many minutes I need to go? Like that. I need to analyze everything. And then finally, I need to jot down that, okay, I'm starting from New CG Road and I'm going on, this BRTS road straight away, and then from this route it costs this much, or this route it is like this. So I need to simply work out. So research is also like that. Once you have a problem in your mind, you need to analyze the problem. You need to analyze what exactly you want to get an answer. So importantly, what is study all about? What is the objective? What ultimately I want to achieve in this research, right? And whether would I be able to achieve anything out of the process that I'm going through? If the answer is yes, then and then I should go for the research process. So let's try to understand what are the components of a research process. So when we are saying any research, fine. For now, we are focusing upon the research as a process and not the paper. Okay, so once you understand the process as a whole, of course, from then only you are going to prepare a paper. And we would have many lectures also on the paper. So, my focus would be more, first of all, on the components of the research process. Right. So, what are the components? So, when anybody start report writing, okay, so we are looking into two things parallelly. One is doing research and the second is report writing. Okay, so what happens is, first of all, as a research process, you need to identify the problem that you want to investigate, the problem, or you need to identify the identification of the problem, identification of the research questions, which is very, very important. You need to identify, you need to ask yourself, what exactly do you want? Why exactly you are carrying out? What answers you want to get, and thereby, what would be the title of the study? Right. So the title of the study, parallelly, that would happen only when you do the proper literature review. Though we are writing down here in this third stage, right, review of literature. But importantly, believe me that you should start with a review of the literature, because your process would start with a review of literature, right? So first of all, you would have some idea in your mind that, okay, I want to do some research on XYZ topic. Okay, the topic can be on management, the topic can be on commerce, the topic can be in the arts, humanities, psychology, English, I mean the language, any field it can be, right? So the first is, what is the title that is coming to your mind? What is the topic that is coming to your mind? And what is the purpose of your study? What is the objective? What is the purpose, right? And for that, you would do the literature review so that you can come to the statement of the problem. Okay. Once you have statement of the problem, you just see, I mean, here I'm just explaining you the flow, and then we're taking each topic one after the other. Right. So once you have statement of the problem, after doing literature review, you would get an idea that, there are some points, and there are some studies already has been done by different authors. So the studies that has been already done, if you are doing the research on that, it's meaningless, right? So for you, what is important is to find out the research gap. Where exactly the gap? If somebody has already done, say for example, you're planning to do the study of higher education in say Gujarat. Okay. Now, if somebody has already done a study on the higher education, the problems and the challenges in Gujarat, what exactly they have done? Okay. What exactly they have analyzed? What does they have not analyzed? What is the gap? Okay, and for filling up that gap, what exactly you want to carry out, and that would decide the statement as well as the scope of the problem. You need to design your boundaries, you need to decide the scope of the study, you need to design the way in which you want to go ahead. Once you have a scope of study in your mind, you have to freeze to the objectives of the study, right? So once you have objectives of the study in your hand, right, you need to jot down the objective one, two, three, whatever. Okay, that this is my objective. I want to study the higher education system because, so and so reason, and this is the ultimate objective. When you are jotting down the objective, you have to keep in mind that your objectives should be very, very specific. Your objective should be very, very clear, not ambiguous, and it should be able to touch to the point where exactly you want to reach. It should be able to answer a reader that this is the ultimate objective for which you are doing the research. The next is concept of the different terms used in the study. That is, you need to identify different terminologies, the terms that are going to be used in the study. So, say for example, the terms can be, when the study is in mergers and acquisition. So the important term is a merger, acquisition, collaboration, amalgamation. These are the terms, these are the concepts. And many times people also look into the conceptual framework of the study, whereby you're trying to, write down what is the important aspect, what are the important models, what are the important theories behind the research. Okay, and then you need to fix the variables that you are going to study. You need to look for the hypothesis. Okay, formulation of hypothesis is very, very important. You need to select the sample, okay, and even the sample size. What would be the sample size? You need to decide with the help of various tests that has been used and based upon the scope and the study that you want to do. And after that, once it is clear, you would try to collect the data. Okay, so in the data collection also, it's very, very important. And when it is primary, we all know that many times people go through the Google form and, the data sometimes becomes invalid if it is not properly, if the questionnaire is not properly filled. Right. So from whom are you collecting and who are the right people from which you can get the data? That's again a very, very important. Once you have data in your hand, you are trying to analyze the data. Okay, and once for the analysis, you all know that there are various statistical tools and techniques that people are using. If it is qualitative data, then you need to analyze it with the help of the what we can say different approaches and different tools and techniques. Once it is done, then you can tabulate the results, you can interpret the results, and you can verify the results. And from that, you would try to draw the conclusions. Now, once the conclusions are drawn, then you can look into what was the objective, what is the conclusion, and during the research based upon the data, you can also, find out what are the problems, what are the suggestions based upon your study. Importantly, the suggestions would be based upon your study. You would also try to see the limitations of the study and importantly, the scope of further research. That is on the basis of your research, once you have done, then when you are in the process, then somewhere at the end or somewhere in the middle, you are able to judge that, okay, further it can be extended to this level. So what is the scope of the future research that you need to identify? The bibliography or the references part, okay, and in the appendix you can keep the published paper that you have out of the study that you have conducted, and then the summary of the report. Okay, so this is in general I have talked about the research process as a whole. Okay, now let us try to understand and take it one after the other. So let's see one after the other. So the first is title of the research or investigation or study, in which the title of any research project should be as brief as possible, as precise as possible, project the scope of the problem in generalized terms. Let's see some of the examples. So these are the examples of the title of the research. First is a study of job satisfaction of commerce college teachers. Secondly, a study of job satisfaction of the Commerce College teachers of Gujarat. You need to observe this title and think over which is giving you exact research title. And the third is a study of job satisfaction of the Government Commerce College teachers of Gujarat. And lastly, you just see a study of the job satisfaction of grant in aid Commerce College teachers of the Gujarat. So, which title is signifying your purpose and which is giving you a clear cut answer? Just try to see. So, the first is, somewhat a broad title, which is talking about a job satisfaction of the Commerce College teachers. And secondly, teachers of Gujarat. Thirdly, Government Commerce College of Gujarat, right? So here in the third title, the researcher is very, very specific that he or she wants to collect the data of the Government Commerce College teachers only. Fourthly, a study of the job satisfaction of granted Commerce College teachers of Gujarat, right? So here what we mean is when you are talking about the title of your research, the title of your research project, the title of your research paper, it should be as brief as possible, as precise as possible, and The scope, it should be in generalized terms. Secondly, the purpose of the study. So the main purpose which led the researcher to take up the present study must be clearly shown. What is the purpose? Why have you done this study? A short description of the importance of the area of research in the present context of social life to be shown, right? So what is exactly the purpose of the study, that you need to put it in a paper? What is the objective? And that objective should be precise, it should be very specific, and it should be related to what exactly you're going to do. Thirdly, critical appraisal of the previous studies, that is called a review of literature. Friends, we are doing review of literature, but in general, many times we have seen that people are, cut and paste of the paragraphs are going on. Actually, the review of literature here represents only review of the previous studies. It would not be helpful. Critical evaluation of the previous study is more meaningful, more useful, and a correct approach in any research is also important. Secondly, because of this, identification and classification would be possible about the different areas covered by various studies. Knowledge regarding different meaning given to concepts and the use of different concepts in various studies is possible, and a specific meaning to be given to certain concepts for the present study is also possible. So, when you're doing literature review in a research paper, or for that matter, for any research, you should try to see that you have critically appraised the previous study. When we talk about research in general, when it is a project, or in general, when it is a paper, people give emphasize on only some part and not the whole part. And many times, because of the number of pages that might be covered, people are doing shortcuts in that. That one should not be. And there is a specific way of writing review of literature which one should follow. Secondly, information of the areas which has been studied thoroughly, and the areas where little attention has been are made available. Right? So the merits and demerits of the research designs adopted in the past studies can be known. Thus, researchers can cover up the loopholes while designing the plan of the present study. Finally, you should consider that by discussing the results of the research paper study, researchers can verify present findings with the previous findings. So, what you need to do is you need to find out the gap between what exactly is existing in the existing literature, and what is the need to do, what is the requirement to do based upon the gap, the research gap. So ultimately you should identify the research gap. Now the next is, after identifying the research gap and after going through the critical evaluation, the researcher will be in a position, you would be in a position to state the problem without any ambiguity. Why? Because you have done all the literature review, you have tried to analyze it, you have tried to paraphrase it, you have tried to find out what is already existence. So the statement of the problem of the study can be presented in two ways. One is in a statement form and the other is in a question form. So let's see here. So a study of job satisfaction of the Commerce College teachers of Gujarat. Now this can be presented in a question form also. How is the job satisfaction of the Commerce College teachers of Gujarat? So one is in a statement form, the second is in a question form. And considering this both in general, you're trying to decide and you're trying to define the statement. Next is the scope of the study. So friends, scope of the study is largely depend on the several factors which fixes the limit of a study. So the factors affect the scope of a study includes the time and the money available to the researcher, availability of sample, possibility of meeting with respondents, and the time allowed by the respondents for the researcher. So, what is important for you is to look into how much time is available to you, how much money is available to you, okay, and with the available of the time and money, how much you would be able to do, the availability of the sample or the probability of availability of the sample, possibility of meeting the respondents. Many times it becomes very very difficult. Say for example, you are doing a survey in the slum area, okay, and such any natural calamity come because of which you are not able to do it. Say for example, your research is on identifying the hygiene factors in the slum area, and due to suddenly this covid thing came up, the project period was up to 1 year and you could not go to collect the data. How would you do that? And what are the time allowed by the respondents for the researcher? That is also very very important. Once the scope of study is fixed, the researcher would be able to write the scope in clear terms while giving out the limitation of his study. So, two type of scope. One is a functional scope and the other is a geographical scope. Say, for example, a study of the job satisfaction of the commerce college teachers of Gujarat, right? So here you're trying to have, you have to decide the scope of the studies either on the basis of the function or on the basis of the geography. The next is objectives of the study. Friends, this is very, very important when we are talking about the journey of the research. The objectives of research is very, very important. The objectives of the present study should be shown in the form of statements, right? So while doing it, you should take care that the objectives are well within the scope of study fixed by you, right? So whatever you decide, you have to stick to it. Next is a conceptualization of the different terms used in the study. So researcher must be aware of the meaning of every term to use. Each and every term that you are using in your research, it should be known. The meaning should be known. It should be defined well in your research. It would help the researcher, respondents, and the readers of the research report in a better understanding various terms used in a study. Normally, these terms or the concepts are explained by nominal definitions and the operational definitions. Okay, so what is nominal definition and operational definition? So the nominal definitions are used in case where a given word is synopsis or synonymous with certain other expressions, the meaning of which are already established. Say, for example, a variable or a concept is said to be operationally defined when the steps in its observation, measurement are clearly stated. So, an operationally defined concept helps the researcher in getting reliable results with which he can establish the facts scientifically. A variable may be defined operationally with the help of the items in the questionnaire or interview. And it is always advisable to define each concept used in the study by both the way. So either it can be in the operational way or it can be in the abstract terms, which gives a general meaning to convey. So what is the meaning of that? Ultimately, you should conceptualize the difference, either the operational or the nominal definitions. Okay. Next is a variable. Friends, variable, now this is very important for all the researchers, right? So a concept which can be taken on different quantitative value is termed as a variable. Say for example, weight, income, education, so on and so forth. Variables which can take on values in decimal points are also, they are termed as a continuous variable. For example, age, weight, income, and so on. And the variable which cannot take on value in decimal points but can only expressed in integer values are termed as a non-continuous variable. For example, number of children, accident, so on and so forth. So, if one variable depends upon the other variable, or is consequences of the other variable, it is termed as dependent variable. And the variable which is previous one of the dependent variable is termed as a independent variable. So you have to identify which is a dependent variable for you, which is independent variable for you. And if we say height, say for example, so height is depend upon the age, height is depend upon the variable, and the age is depend upon the independent variable, right? So height is a dependent variable and the age is independent variable because height is depending upon the age. So in your study, you need to identify the variables, specifically the continuous variable or even dependent or the independent variables. The next is formulation of the hypothesis. Friends, a tentative solution suggested to a problem is termed as a hypothesis. So when a prediction is to be tested by a scientific method, it is termed as a hypothesis. So a hypothesis should be framed depending upon one or more of the different resources or the sources. Like say for example, facts established by previous studies in the related areas through researchers' experience and observations, through researchers' reasoning and insight, logical derivation from a theory. So, how the hypothesis is framed, okay, that is very, very important. So, there are two hypotheses, two types of hypothesis framed. One is a null hypothesis, the other is a alternative hypothesis, right? So, what is null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis? So, something that you are assuming somewhere you are trying to predict some problem, okay, and when you're checking that, it becomes a alternative hypothesis. So, say for example, there is no significant relationship between age and height. That is a null hypothesis. So, then the alternative hypothesis would be there is a relationships, right? So, the point is you need to jot down your null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. Then you have a selection of the sample. So, for the purpose of the study, a certain number of data which represents the whole population are selected. So, the method of selection is termed as a sampling, and the data which is selected is termed as a sample. For example, asking question to a student. In social sciences, there are a number of individuals. For collection of data with the help of questionnaire, test, interview, and observation, it becomes too difficult work. So, when to get data, how to get data, that is very, very important. And for that, selection of sample is very, very important, right? Whom you are going to say, for example, in the previous example, when we have said the title, it was focusing upon college teachers. So which college teacher you are talking about? So you're talking about grantinate college teacher, you're talking about government college teachers. What are you talking about in selection of the sample? So while selecting sample, the following facts should be kept in mind. Number one is definition of the universe. So what is universe? It is a whole group from which, with a view to collecting required data, a population is selected, is termed as a universe. So say for example, a study on buying behavior pattern of the cell phone customers of the Rajkot city. Now, Rajpur city, when you're talking about, it is a whole population that you're talking about. You're not saying that you want from a particular area or you want particular category of the customers or you want to check something else, right? So when you're saying definition of the population, it is a whole group for which the generalization is being made and from which with a view to collecting required data, a sample is selected. It is termed as a population. So the different sample and population is their size. So the study on the buying behavior pattern of cell phone customers of Rajpur city. So here it is very, very specific and they're saying with reference to the working women, right? So here Your population is defined that you want to focus upon the working woman, you want to focus upon the working women of the Rajkot city who are utilizing the cell phone, and you want to check their buying behavior pattern. Now, in that, sample size is very, very important because it depends upon the type of research. Say, for example, experimental research design, it would be very small as compared to the descriptive research, right? So, it would be advisable to collect the data from more numbers of individuals than required sample size to avoid casualties, right? So, the sample size is very, very important for you. So in your decide or when you are deciding your research design, right? The experimental research design, if it is, then it would be small. But if you are going for descriptive sample size, your research, sample size, it can be, 500, 600,000 or even more than that. Next is representativeness of the sample. So it's very fundamental and crucial in any research design to give a sense to the study that the sample will be selected for the study must represent the population or hold all such characters which have with population. Different techniques of the sampling should be used. So that is a representative of the sample. Now let's try to see the data collection to see the primary data as well as the secondary data. So the researcher is now required to select a tool or instrument for collecting the data. Now for this, he may construct new tool or may use readily available tools, right? So after modification, say for example, you are taking some readily available, tool, maybe a questionnaire, okay, well structured, well designed, a model questionnaire that is given for a specific, topic that can be used by you, which will suit the local condition, and then you can add a new tool in that, right? So that is data collection primary as well as the secondary data. The next thing is analysis of data. So in the research process, it is not always possible to even, desirable to make the complete planning in advance, because many times once you get data, parallelly you are getting an idea that something is happening or maybe something that is happening unexpected. So the new ideas, concepts are taking place in mind of the researcher as he goes on collecting the data. So, depending upon the nature of the data and the information required by the hypothesis, the researcher should analyze the data by using proper statistical analysis, which is very, very important. Now, what tool to use when there can be a separate session on that, but yes, analysis, maybe a quantitative analysis or qualitative analysis, both has a separate different tools that can be used. The next is a tabulation of the results. So in the research process, the next step is you need to tabulate the results. So the researcher gets certain results after detailed analysis of the data. So tabulation of the results should be made in a meaningful manner. Tabulation itself is a technique and an art. So each table should be given a suitable heading, right? You have to remember many times you're submitting your thesis, submitting your paper, okay, or submitting your project. You should keep in mind that, you have a specific heading on that. So the detailed discussion should also be given at the end of each table. And nowadays, it has become a practice to give all the tables in a series number at the end by way of appendix. So the researcher is free to adopt any one of the above practices, right? Either you can do the detailed analysis in a quantitative or qualitative method, right? But then somewhere it is an art, okay, and it should have a suitable heading. Next is interpretation of the results. So the tabulated results of the study are required to interpret keeping in view the assumption made for the study. So they are interpreted in relation to knowledge received by the critical appraisal of the previous study, but have a great impact on the interpretation of the results. So the finding of the present study may or may not confirm the finding of the previous studies. Right. Secondly, generalization. Many times people generalize so many times. So the researcher can generalize finding of his study for his he is required to have information regarding the definition of the population, reliability of the statistics, and the level of significance of the statistics set by him for testing the hypothesis. Looking for unusual case, it is necessary to test the difference or the relationship between two or more variables are significant or not significant to interpret the data. Right. So interpretation is very, very important. Sometimes people are writing like, hypothesis is rejected or hypothesis is accepted. That is fine. But then what is the meaning of that and what does it say actually? That is important. Next is a verification of the research. So the researcher should verify the results of the study undertaken, right? So for this, he should apply same method of data collecting on some analyze to check whether these results confirm the earlier finding or not. And if there are differences, the researcher should think of loopholes of the research design, if any, and rectify them in collecting the further data. Now, once you verify the result that everything is okay, you can go for the finding and conclusions. So there'll be positive as well as the negative findings. And after successful verification of the results, for the second time, the researcher can go for drawing conclusions of the study, right? And then you can give a suggestions for the improvement based upon the findings, especially which are having a negative impact on the functional scope of the research. Suggestions must be given, right? So sometimes people are suggesting anything abrupt just on the basis of the generalized data. Believe me and keep that in mind. If you're suggesting something, it should be on the basis of the research that you have done. So suggestions must be based on the fact finding. It should be supported by the figures. It should be supported by the data used for the study. And it can be specific to the units selected, industry, government, policymakers, so on and so forth. You should not give any baseless suggestions. Now let's try to look into the scope for further research. So any research cannot hold complete form as it is an endless process. So the researcher should give direction for the further in the same area. He should be able to give suggestions for this from the knowledge which he has received during the course of the study, right? So scope, designing the scope, I mean, that would come automatically when you have done this study, when you have analyzed everything. You already know that what is the further scope and simply you can define. And next is bibliography, which is a detailed list of the various books, journals, magazines, articles, newspapers, so on and so forth. So there are different methods of reporting bibliography. At the end of each paper, at the end of each chapter, with a write-up in the bracket, adapt any of them. However, he should adapt APA style of writing down the references. You can look into here the order that is observed in general while writing down the references. So the name of author, year of publication, title of the book, title of the article, or the journal's name, volume number, page number, and the publisher's address, right? So writing bibliography is very, very important. The most common adopted is a APA style of writing, bibliography or the references. And lastly, there will be summary of the report. So the researcher should give a summary or the abstract of the entire study, right? Which is called a synopsis for the people who are doing the, PhD, and for the people who are preparing a report, there should be a short summary. And when you are preparing a paper, then this summary of report will go as a conclusion of your paper. Right. So in that, you should highlight the findings of the study and the suggestions for the further research, as well as the overall crux of the paper. and an expert in the area in which the study has been undertaken will come to know about the study through the summary of the report, right? So, along with these aspects that we have discussed so far, right, which includes these aspects, the components of the research process that we have discussed. And in each component, what is so important that we have tried to highlight, right? So, in any research process, this is the whole process that anyone needs to maintain. But what is the difference while you're writing down a paper, while you're writing down a report, while you're writing down a thesis, right? So, when you're writing down a thesis, it would be all detail. When you're writing down a project, of course, it would be all detail. But when you're writing down a paper, you need to accumulate, you need to paraphrase, you need to combine, you have to think better and think much more than writing down the thesis or the paper. Why? Because you have certain limitations like a page number, like the words, I mean the number of words that you need to follow, and importantly, you have to take care of the plagiarism, right? In all the cases in the whole research project or the whole research process, the important aspect to be taken care of is regarding the plagiarism. So there are five types of plagiarism, right? So what is plagiarism? Presenting another's original thoughts or ideas as your own, or using another's exact words without proper citation. Friends, this is very important. When you're writing down a paper, you cannot produce anybody's original thoughts or the ideas. And secondly, using another's exact words without proper citation. Mind well, here it is underlined and bold. Without proper citation, you are not allowed to do so. So, what are the strategies to avoid the plagiarism? Isolate the reasons why plagiarism occurs, identify the different types of plagiarism, and integrate the plagiarism prevention. Let us try to see what is unintentional, because many times we are saying, no, 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 I have not copied, there is no plagiarism, but there is certain unintentional plagiarism also that we need to know. So, one is paraphrasing poorly, changing a few words without changing a sentence structure of the original, or changing the sentence structure but not the words. Now these happens mostly in case of the literature review. When you're doing the literature review, what happens is you're not changing the structure of the word, and many a time people paraphrase, using a few different words only, or even without changing a statement. So, which is not a good sign, because somewhere or the other way, when you're doing this, then you can fall under the category of the plagiarism. Second is quoting properly, poorly. So, putting quotation marks around the part of the quotation, but not around all of it, or putting quotation marks around a passage that is partly paraphrased and partly quoted, or citing poorly, that is omitting an occasional citation or citing inaccurately, right? So that is important. Now there are two types here. One is intentional, other is unintentional plagiarism. So the intentional here means passing off as one's own pre-written papers from the internet or other sources, copying an essay or article from the internet, online source, or electronic database without quoting or giving credit. Now, this is very important. Many times we copy without giving a credit, and this happens specifically in the research papers. Cutting and pasting from more than one source to create a paper without putting or giving a credit. Many times people, use their intelligence in cut paste from more than one paper. So it seems it is not copied, right? And even the borrowing of the words or ideas from other students or other people, right, without giving them credit, this all is intentional. Here you are intentionally making a mix, and you are intentionally trying to make sure that no one should feel that it is plagiarism. Okay. Now, plagiarism prevention. So, what is important is be authentic. Friends, you need to develop a topic based on the previously written material, but Write something new, write something own, write something original. Even when the research paper, when you are writing down, many times we know that you are developing a topic based upon the written material, and there is nothing different in that. You are just changing a geography, you are just changing a functional area and putting the same title. Please don't do so, right? So develop something new, something original. Same, we rely on the opinion of the experts on a topic, but improve upon those opinions. That is also very, very important. You should get it checked with the experts. Give a credit to the researchers while making your own contribution, right? You have to give credit to the researcher while making your own contribution. If somebody, some is a co-author or someone has worked for you, you have to give that credit. And importantly, follow a methodology of the MLA and the APA style of the formatting. Now, these are certain types of plagiarism. So, the first type of plagiarism is plagiarism of words, that is, using another's exact words without citing a paper, right, or without citing the author. So, what is not correct? Plagiarism is the reproduction of someone else's words, ideas, findings, and presenting them as one's own without proper acknowledgement. What is correct? It is a reproduction. Just try to see the way in which it is written, right? So here you have put in inverted commas and into bracket you have cited. If you do the citation, then somewhere. So second is plagiarism of the structure. So paraphrasing another words by changing the sentence construction and so, but then maintaining original sentence and the flow. Many times we maintain the flow, we change the words, but that is not advisable. Third is plagiarism of the ideas. Many times we borrow the idea. Okay, we are not giving a credit to the person. We are submitting a paper without citing or incorrectly citing another's ideas. The fourth type of plagiarism is plagiarism of authorship, right? So turning in a replication of another work, submitting a paper that you got off the internet or from a friend and presenting it as your own. That happens in the project also, that is happening. Okay, the authorship, you are plagiarism. I mean, that is not advisable. And the fifth is plagiarism of self, the use of the previous work. For example, I have written a research paper on women entrepreneurship, and in my same next paper, I'm using the same words, same thoughts, and receiving credit for previous assignment. So it is considered as cheating, even if it is my own paper, even if it is my own article, right? To some extent only I can paraphrase and I can put it in a quotation mark, or I can give a citation, or otherwise it is again not, advisable. So why? Because as a researcher, when you are in this research process, and specifically when you are in research paper writing, you should avoid the plagiarism because there are penalties associated with it. Although plagiarism can be intentional or unintentional, both have consequences. You cannot say that, oh, I didn't do anything intentionally, right? But somewhere you have plagiarized yourself, right? So, like writing a research paper, same way case writing is also a journey, right? So, say for example, somebody say that I want to be a case writer. Okay, so there can be a multiple purposes, maybe out of curiosity, maybe because of the school imperative. I mean, your college is saying that write a case, and so you are writing. Maybe a personal progress or a no case, no promotion type of situation. Maybe because you have your own research interest, felt course or program mate. Okay, so what is a case? Simply it is a description of the real life situation involving a decision maker, and the decision maker needs to decide something and take responsibility for the review, decision, implementation, and the consequences, right? So why I'm explaining this here is many times in the conferences or for the journals, people are writing a paper, and along with that, many times they are writing a case. So it is very, very necessary that what is our role as a case writer. So we are representatives of both. One is a researcher, and the second is learner. So what you need to do is you need to separate the decision maker from researcher in terms of their role. right? So first is decision making. Uses existing knowledge to size up, generate alternatives and decide. And generation of the new knowledge is not primary. And when we are saying researcher, he uses existing knowledge to generate the new knowledge for the theory and practice. So this is the decision maker and a researcher. This is the difference. So if you want to be a good case writer, okay, what are the key milestones? First is occurrence recognition, right? You should identify what occurrence you are talking about. Associate of learning objective and lead definition. You need to define your lead, right? Clearance from the organization and a resource allocation. And then you can start data collection. Once you collect the data, probably you should draft, so drafting, and then you should get it checked and redrafting. You can have a class testing and then the clearance. Okay. So the point is when you're talking about the occurrence recognition, development in the organization or the environment in which someone was involved, right? So you are trying to take it as a case, as a situation, as base, and then you would define it. So associate a learning objective with the occurrence and define a case lead. It can be nothing in the sky, right? So learning objective is linked with a session, module, course, program, and a mission of the educational institution. So occurrence plus purpose that would lead you to define case lead. Then where are the occurrences reported? I mean, it is reported everywhere: newspaper, magazines, channels, interaction with the executives, consulting assignments, guest sessions, visits to the industry, so on and so forth. It can be a reflection on the experiences of the self and the colleagues also. So what you need to do is you need to evaluate the case lead well. You have to see that what is the significance and whether it is meeting the learning requirement. It may happen that your topic is entrepreneurship and you're talking, something which is irrelevant. You're talking about language, you're talking about something which is not relevant and it may not fit to the program. You have to look into availability of the data, qualitative and quantitative. Same way resources needed versus availability. Also the comfort level of the writer. Okay, so that is the evaluation of the case lead. Same way clearances you need to take from the institutions and from the organization for whom you are writing the case, can pursue the lead, preparing the proposal. At each stage, you may require to take the clearances, right? While you're writing the case, you may need to go to the company, visit the company, have a detailed data collection, okay, additionally data from the secondary sources, so on and so forth, and then you should draft the case. And you should keep in mind that there is a faithfulness. Okay. I mean, you have to write in a way that people faith you. There should be a sensitivity to the issues that might occur once it goes to the public. Okay. You have to take care of the disguising the things and, telling the things. And there should be clearance from all the side. This is very, very basic. And then after, you need to redraft. So when you redraft, you need to get it checked by the colleagues, seek support to test in the class, feedback from the participants, incorporate the changes, so on and so forth. Okay, so the content of a decision-oriented case includes context of decision making, right? So the key developments leading to the decision making situation, organization and its performance, individual, industry and competition, right? Options considered and their pros and cons and the supporting exhibit and appendixes, right? So the content should be very, very important. So what is the content of a research oriented case? So you should try to get it editorial check. You should try to get clearance. You should try to complete the finalization. You have to go for registration and seek support for the development of the teaching note. So these you are needed to keep in mind while we are talking about writing a case, right? So I hope you are ready for the long journey of writing a case, going in a research process, and writing a paper itself. So congratulations, you know by now what is the research process, what is the way in which you should keep in mind, okay, and importantly, what is the importance of the plagiarism, how you should avoid the intentional and unintentional plagiarism, and importantly, you have also tried to look into the case writing journey, right? So, with this, I would like to end the session, and I hope you like the session. Thank you.